Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming to tonight's regular scheduled meeting of the Mulberry City Council. The first thing that we do not, first I want to tell everybody we have some extra copies of the agenda. So if you didn't get a copy of the agenda, we have some extra copies at the podium. Feel free to step up and grab those. We also are going to have a couple different opportunities tonight for public comment. So I want to go ahead and let you know about that. So if we're going to have a couple general public comments and then a couple ordinance public comments. So we'll discuss those when we get closer. I don't believe that the pastors are here tonight. So we're going to skip straight to the call to order. And so again, thank you to tonight's meeting. I'm going to go ahead and officially call the roll. The first from District 1, please, or if you could raise your right hand and announce present if you are here. From District 1, Tim Sullivan.
Present.
District 2, Michael Coker, that is me. District 3, Kyle Shields.
Present.
District 4 would be Mayor Pro Tem Michael Rudnick. And then District 5 is Councilman Doug Ingram.
Present.
Okay, hearing that all 5 council members are present, that we will officially conduct this meeting for the Mulberry City Council. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you're able, if you could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance So to give you an idea of what tonight's meeting is officially going to look like, to give you kind of an overview of where we are. So tonight is the first read of the City of Mulberry city ordinances. There will be another opportunity. So tonight you will hear about the ordinances that are being proposed. Those ordinances will not be adopted tonight. It is the first read of those particular ordinances. Then what will happen is we are going to post those. So feel free to take notes, but we will also make sure that you have a copy. Obviously, you can see the printouts we have. I mean, it's a substantial amount of pages that we're looking at. There will be a second read. So once you've had time to review every page, if you'd like to, of those city ordinances, on January 1st at 00:00 hours, so at basically when the clock strikes midnight on January 1st of 2025, we will host our second read of the ordinances. We will also have public comment, so you will be more than welcome to come back up, talk about those ordinances, and specifically discuss them. And so that is kind of how tonight's going to work. So the first items up on that agenda are those different ordinances. We're going to kind of go through each of those sections in turn. We also have a few action items to get to towards the end. And so obviously it's going to be a busy night. It's probably going to be a long night. So I want to go ahead and warn you. And how the night's going to look is we're going to start with those ordinances. First we'll have some public comment on if there is any before the ordinances. Then we'll have the reading of those ordinances. Then we'll have the action items. And then we'll have some final public comment and a potential executive session after. So the first item up that I have is I have a copy of the minutes under item F for the Mulberry City Council meeting summary, which was held here at Hamiltonville United Methodist Church on December the 10th, 2024. I will, first off, has the council had a chance to review those minutes, and are there any errors or omissions or any discussion? Okay, at this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from December the 10th, 2024.
Motion to adopt the minutes from December 10th, 2024.
Second the motion.
Okay, any further discussion on those minutes? Okay, at this time, we will call a vote. All in favor of adopting the minutes, raise your right hand and say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, the council meeting summary for December the 10th, 2024 is hereby adopted. The next thing is we're going to obviously take a look. I've talked a little bit about tonight's agenda and how things are going to work. Is there any discussion from the council members about the agenda or any additional items that need to be added? I have one item that I'd like to add under the action items if we can. I would propose an amendment to the agenda to add agenda item, what would be agenda item G under the action items. And that would be to discuss and call a special called meeting on December the 23rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. Just to discuss some additional matters. So I would like to add that. I would make a motion to add that item to the agenda. Is there any other additions to the agenda? Okay, hearing nothing, I will make a motion to add agenda item G under action items, which is to discuss a potential special called meeting on December the 23rd at 9 a.m. Do I have a second?
You have a second?
Any discussion on adding that agenda item? Okay. At this time, I'll call a vote. All in favor of adding or amending the agenda to add that item? All opposed? Okay. It's a unanimous that the agenda item G is added, to discuss a potential meeting, special called meeting on December 23rd at 9 a.m. At this time, is there any other discussion about the agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda as amended?
Make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Councilmember Ingram with the second. Any other discussion? At this time, I will call a vote. All in favor of adopting tonight's agenda? All opposed? Okay, the agenda for this evening is adopted unanimously. Okay. The first thing we're going to do now, if there is any public comment to begin the night on the agenda items, we are going to open that up. What we will ask, obviously we know that people probably have not had time to sign up yet, but we would ask, if you don't mind, to sign your name on the sheet that our acting clerk, Ms. Pitts, is holding, if there is any, and then we will ask that you limit your comments to 2 minutes. The acting clerk, Ms. Pitts, will keep time, and then we will, the council at this time will not be able to respond to any public comments. So is there any public comments to start the meeting?
Andrea Polk Stevenson.
Okay, Ms. Stevenson, it's good to see you. If you could come up to the podium for us. If you could, when you get to the podium, if you could state your name, your address, and if you are a resident of Mulberry, if you could state your district, if you know it.
Andrea Polk Stevenson, 3243 Millgrove Terrace. I believe I'm in your district, which is 2?
Okay.
Yeah. I just, I didn't mean to speak or had nothing to say really, but I am looking at all of our 5 new city council members, and I want to congratulate you all and hope that you'll, do us proud in the future. But I do want to mention that I see only male figures here, and I'm just hoping that you will think about that, and in your, and I'm advising you or asking you to think about the fact that you'll need some females in charge of committees and other items that you're going to be appointing. So I'm just asking for that, and I think we really need both, perspectives, as well as minority perspectives and non-English speaking perspectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Madam Clerk, is there any other public comment? Okay, hearing none, we will go ahead and close this initial public comment. For the next item, when we get to the ordinances, obviously Mr. Riley, most of these items are yours, so I think what I'm going to do in the interest of efficiency, is I'm going to turn it over to you and maybe let you handle the first reads of these particular ordinances.
Mayor Pro Tem, council members, if I could just give you a little preface on all this. We have built you what I would call a vanilla set of our ordinances at this point in time. You will have all the time in the world to go through and put together ordinances, but you need a set of ordinances that you can start from. We chose to go to the Peachtree Corners ordinances because they are the most similarly situated as you are, with a limited services government, also coming out of a Gwinnett County government, where they have ordinances that marry up and mesh with Gwinnett County, where there's Gwinnett County doing services for them, so we chose to start with those. We simplified those also. We didn't put any things like the special service districts or the historic commission or business development or the marshal's office. All of those things you may want to look at a later date, but we didn't. We just tried to stay with the core, and that's how we went forward with it. We're going to go ahead and have the first one is the sexually oriented business ordinance. I have Mr. Berthold here, Mr. Scott Berthold. He's out of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Mr. Berthold is a nationally recognized specialist in these areas of sexually oriented businesses. I know that he had a case today that he's not having to try today in Fargo, North Dakota, but that's his practice goes from the tip of Florida to at least Fargo. And so he is well known and the best in this area of the country and probably in the country. And he has prepared an ordinance for you. There are places in the Peachtree Corners ordinance that you will see some of the things sexually oriented businesses. He had prepared that also. That has been codified in their municipal code. We are going to ask you to take those codified pieces, but we're also going to ask you to adopt the new ordinance that Mr. Berthold has prepared, which is an ordinance that meets more of the criteria of the latest case law. And at the point in time you pass that one, it will supersede anything that you took on before out of Peachtree Corners, which was also his ordinance. But we're going to ask you to go ahead and on the first, adopt that ordinance on the first. But I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Berthold because he's going to explain the reasons that he has to put all that backup data in this today so you can have this for all your consideration. Mr. Berthold.
Thank you, Bill. Mayor Pro Tem, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to address you tonight. As Bill mentioned, I've worked with him in a number of cities, Johns Creek, Dunwoody, Sandy Springs, Peachtree Corners, and then Atlanta and around the country, dealing with cities having to address proactively the adverse impacts that can be caused by sexually oriented businesses or adult establishments, which is the name of this ordinance. And what's necessary from the case law, from the Supreme Court on down, is to make sure that the cities get out ahead of this issue, have some regulations in place, think about this, because the Supreme Court has said that you can't ban these types of businesses from a community. Maybe if you had a population of 800, you might get away with it, but in any city of any size like this one, you have to have some places where adult businesses can go, but you can strictly regulate the time, the place, and the manner of their operation. And that's what this set of ordinances do. And tonight, mainly what I'm doing on the first read is making a presentation, providing you with some data, some information you can peruse when you come back on second reading before you adopt these for two ordinances. One is Ordinance 25-0101, which is a comprehensive set of restrictive regulations for adult businesses. And then my portion also, the presentation I'm doing on these negative secondary land use impacts, also applies to the portions of the UDO, obviously, that will regulate these types of uses. So at this time, if I can, I'm just going to give to the clerk and hand to each member of the council a thumb drive, because I didn't want to kill any trees for this presentation. The material is like 2,500 pages of land use studies, crime impact reports that cities around the country and around the Atlanta metro area have done and have looked at over the years to document why we regulate these places. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I think he said I could just click, and we will see if it comes on up on the screen, and then we'll walk through this briefly. But we have essentially from the Supreme Court of the United States a mandate, and that is from Renton versus Playtime Theaters. It's a 1986 case, so now about a 40-year-old case that deals with regulating establishments like this. And here's what they've said that's relevant to Mulberry. Cities don't have to wait for something to get set up, cause problems, cause crime, or decrease property values to regulate that. Rather, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, in this case out of the area around Seattle, Washington, they said the First Amendment doesn't require a city, before enacting an ordinance, to conduct new studies or produce new evidence independent of those pieces of evidence already gathered by other cities, so long as whatever the city is relying upon is, quote, reasonably believed to be relevant to the problem that the city addresses. And so that's what we're doing tonight. We're relying on the experiences of other cities, not just here in Georgia, but also from around the country that have studied this issue, that have grappled with it for some of them for decades. Like Bill said, we've represented cities from Pasadena, California, to Milford, Connecticut, to Indianapolis, to Daytona Beach. And the problems are pretty much similar in all these jurisdictions, so that's why we're getting out ahead of it. The courts, when we talk about this term, negative secondary impacts or secondary effects, it's a legal term, it's judicial jargon, but essentially it means negative impacts on surrounding property values, personal and property crimes, lewdness and the sex crimes that you would associate with a place like this, drug use and trafficking, and then aesthetic impacts like litter, traffic, noise, and blight. Courts have said those are all very substantial governmental interests that city councils can regulate to address. And when you do those regulations on this thumb drive, in these couple thousand pages, there's a number of different types of evidence that cities typically rely upon. They rely upon land use impacts, but also police crime impact reports, other judicial opinions. You can rely on what the courts have said. We have a lot of really good cases that we've litigated out of Brookhaven and Doraville and Johns Creek that are published in the Court of Appeals and in the Supreme Court here in Georgia about these negative impacts. And so we have some of those judicial opinions on the thumb drive. Also, expert reports from criminologists and social scientists, and then anecdotal data is also relevant to the legislative judgment. And here's basically the rationale set forth in the ordinance for regulating this category of land uses. And that is, these establishments are associated as a category of commercial uses with a wide variety of these adverse land use impacts. And we want to address these negative impacts on surrounding properties as well as what goes on inside the establishment through regulations of the time, the place, and the manner of their operation. There's a number of cases that our firm's been involved in. The first one there at the top, Daytona Grande versus City of Daytona Beach. As many of you know, the federal appellate court that governs cases coming out of Georgia is the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit that sits in downtown Atlanta. It covers cases out of Georgia, Alabama, and Florida. One of the leading cases is the case we handle for Daytona Beach, upholding their zoning and their new conduct ordinances and regulations of alcohol that deal with this type of business. And so a lot of the principles that we're relying upon in our Mulberry regulations come from cases like this. We also have hours of operation regulations, prohibitions on nude conduct, licensing and background checks that are parts of these regulations. And those are based on these cases that are up on your screen. The bottom two, the one at the U.S. Supreme Court for the city of Littleton, Colorado. We did the briefing for the city of Littleton in the U.S. Supreme Court. And then we handled for Brookhaven, right down the road, the Stardust case that was decided in the city's favor in 2018. That establishment's closed. The place was found in contempt of court and fined a couple $100,000 and decided to go away. And then these other cases listed on the screen are all our cases: Sandy Springs, 11th Circuit case out of Manatee County, Georgia Court of Appeals case out of Brookhaven, and then the Oasis case that upheld the ordinance in the city of Doraville, which is very much like this ordinance. Ultimately, after a protracted litigation, the original decision in 2015 from the Georgia Supreme Court actually came very quickly after the lawsuit was filed, but some follow-on litigation led to the closure of that business and the city of Doraville collecting actually $1.89 million in actual money given to the city of Doraville as a result of contempt findings that were upheld by the Georgia Appellate appellate courts. And then we've got some cases that talk about retail stores. They can also, it's not just strip clubs, but retail sex shops and adult bookstores can be regulated. And so we have regulations in the packet that address those as well. And then we regulate these adult toy stores. You just want to make sure that you are limiting places where these types of establishments can go, so they don't open up in your best thoroughfares right in the center commercial corridor where the best restaurants and everything are. The studies have shown that they have negative depressive impacts on property values, or what would normally be the increase in property values over time. So we want to make sure that we're addressing that. And we do that based on a body of evidence that goes back all the way to like 1977. Some of these studies are 30 years old, some of them are 5 years old. But the common denominator, or sort of the thread that runs so true, is that these as a category of land uses have adverse impacts with all adult uses, and the courts have found it, but also expert criminologists have found it in cities and studies they've done. A lot of these have been peer-reviewed and published in criminology journals, and so we rely upon that type of information and those types of statistics, as well as private investigator affidavits from the city of Sandy Springs and documenting illegal activity inside establishments. We can rely on both anecdotal data as well as more what we would call empirical data. So these are the bottom line findings of these court-approved expert findings. Number one, the finding about adverse secondary effects from these land uses is confirmed in a wide variety of stories. Sometimes the industries come in, like they did in the Sandy Springs case we litigated in the federal court, and do their own counter study, and those are often found out to be flawed because they rely on unreliable data sets that undercount vice crimes like drugs and illicit sexual activity. And then all subclasses of sexually oriented businesses, including just retail stores, have these adverse impacts, and we cite some case law on that. So there's a number of cases where the courts have rejected these industry sort of counter arguments, and we've litigated some of these cases, but we want to make you aware of them because there are cases that can be relevant if something ever happens in the city of Mulberry. And bottom line here is we're just trying to be proactive. We're trying to think ahead and not wait until the wolf is at the door. We have no reason to think that there's any such wolf at the time, but we want to make sure we're getting out in front of this. I think the city council, and I would commend Mr. Riley for thinking about this and knowing that we need to do this. I mean, I was there on December 1st, 2006, the moment at midnight when Johns Creek became a city. We were doing the same thing, making sure we were teed up and ready to go. And there actually was some litigation that was going on 2 days before the city became a city. A place opened up illegally in what would be in 2 days the new city of Johns Creek. So we had to litigate that for a little bit, and that place closed. But we want to make sure we're on top of things, and that's what Mr. Riley's making sure that we're doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the council? Okay.
I have a question, Mayor.
Yes.
So the purpose of making this part of the record is just to ensure that the secondary effects, as you call them, are well established on the record so that we hopefully avoid litigation in the future. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep. The Supreme Court said we can't say, hey, porn's immoral, bad, and make that the justification for regulating these. People have their own personal views of all that stuff, but from a legal perspective, we focus on the adverse secondary effects that the courts have accepted over and over again, and we're building that record for the ordinances in Mulberry.
And so what's on this thumb drive will become part of it. You said it's 2,500 pages of...
That's why I didn't
okay.
print it. But it will be part of the record. It'll be attached, to the minutes, in a file, so that if 5 years down the road something comes up and someone, I've had cities that I represent where first thing they saw was a lawsuit. Like, oh, you can't let me locate where I want to go. I'm going to file a lawsuit. And so we want to make sure that we can pull back the minutes from 2024 or 25 and say, hey, these are based on solid empirical evidence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? All right, thank you for being here. We appreciate that. All right, Mr. Riley, I will turn it back over to you. Oh, Mr. Riley, is this an appropriate time to do public comments, or would we like to hold on that?
Oh, we'll go through, what I would do is let me go through all of mine, and when we get to we need to have public comments on the zoning ordinance and on the sign ordinance, and I believe then you have public comments again later in the agenda.
Perfect, thank you.
I'm going to hand out some of these thumb drives too, but these are just the ordinances from over there. They will not be nearly as interesting reading as what Mr. Berthold has handed you. to look at the other ones as nasty as they are. The next ordinance we have is a first read of 250102. That would be Chapter 1, creating the general provisions for setting the methodologies, terms, and use definitions, penalties, and for other purposes of the Mulberry City ordinances. There won't be a hearing on that tonight or any further presentation. Ordinance, the number C is 250103. It's first read of an ordinance creating Chapter 2, administration, creating a framework for the administration for the City of Mulberry's government. The next ordinance is 250104. That's the first read of an ordinance of Mulberry, Georgia, creating Chapter 6, alcoholic beverages, creating a framework for controlling sales and distribution of alcoholic beverages within the city. The next one is ordinance number 250105. That's E. That's the first read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry, Georgia, Chapter 10, Buildings and Building Regulations, creating a framework for construction, maintenance, enforcement, and demolition of properties within the City of Mulberry. The next is F. That would be ordinance 241223. This would be an ordinance that I believe that we will ask you to vote on next Monday. This is the ordinance for businesses, creating a framework of operation and licensing for various businesses within the City of Mulberry. We'll be asking you to vote on that next week so we can send out our bills for our occupational tax certificates so we can go ahead and get the renewals going. That's why we're going to have that one next week so we can go ahead and get that done. Then the next one is G, which is 250107. That's first read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry, Georgia, creating Chapter 18, Environment, creating a framework for erosion control, runoff, illicit discharge, stormwater management, and litter control. The next is H, ordinance number 250106. It's the first read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry, Georgia, creating Chapter 22, Fire Protection, creating a framework for fire safety regulations within the city. The next is ordinance is number I, 250108. First read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry creating Chapter 26, Floods, creating a flood management plan for flood damage prevention and a framework for its implementation. The next is 250109. That's first read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry creating Chapter 34, Land Development Regulation, creating a framework for requirements for land development. That one is the Peachtree Corners document. We have a second one that is engrossed within the zoning ordinance that Mr. McCumber will be presenting, and at a time in the future we will merge those two. But we have both of them presented tonight. But we will, between now and the 31st or the 1st, we will make a determination of which one that they would recommend to you to go forward with. We've just carried forward the Peachtree Corners one. It may or may not be passed on a second. We may just take the one that's engrossed within the zoning ordinance, but that decision hadn't been made. We would make a recommendation on the 31st of which one to take. You'll have both with you. All right. Then the next one is ordinance 250110. That is an ordinance creating Chapter 38, manufactured homes and trailers, and creating a methodology for taxation, permitting, location, and other regulations. The next one is L, 250111. That's the first read of an ordinance, Mulberry, Georgia, creating Chapter 2, nuisances, creating a framework for describing nuisances and other nuisance-like activities, the prosecution of the same, and the abatement of the same. The next one is M, ordinance number 250112, first read of an ordinance for the City of Mulberry, creating Chapter 46, pawn shops, creating framework for the licensure and requirements and operation of pawn shops within the city. The next one is that's ordinance 250113, first read of an ordinance for the city of Mulberry, Georgia, creating Chapter 50, Planning and Development, creating a framework for development regulations, land use plans, planning commissions, policy of withdrawal, zoning amendment applications, buffers, definitions, buffer regulations, landscape regulations for other purposes. That also will be a part of what Mr. McCumber and I work on between now and the 31st. And then the next one is ordinance 250114. It's a first read of an ordinance of the city of Mulberry, Georgia, creating Chapter 54 signs, creating a framework for regulating signage. There will be a public hearing. That is one of the two that Mr. McCumber is here to speak to tonight. Clark Patterson Lee has done more than yeoman's work, master's work in putting these together and having this for you on tonight. These are kinds of things that sometimes take months to do, and they have gotten it for you. I'll turn it over to Mr. McCumber.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and council members. Again, my name is Kevin McCumber, and I'm a vice president with CPL Architects, Engineers, and Planners. And what you heard that came out of largely Peachtree Corners is how a city has produced their ordinances. And as this area was unincorporated Gwinnett County, what we've been focused on is taking the previous Gwinnett County regulations and modifying those for what would be useful to the city of Mulberry. I will provide you with just a brief overview of some of the changes we've made. I think we've provided Mr. Riley with both a marked up version of the work with all the changes in red, and then also a clean version that's available to you. Mr. Riley, is that on that drive that you've already provided him? Yes. Okay. Very good. So you already have copies of that. But just a quick overview. This is sort of a stopgap measure to make sure that we've got everything covered that would need to be covered between what you heard in Peachtree Corners and for Gwinnett County. It will also include an adoption of the official zoning map that was provided by InterDev working with us. Gwinnett County's ordinance with the following adjustments. We added language about the interchangeability of the word city and county. We did make those changes, but just in the event that we missed any of those, we've got that covered. We've got added guidance for transitional provisions and prior approvals related to vested rights. That's in sections 100-50, 60, and 70. We did increase the minimum lot size for the R60 district to 8,500 square feet, which is up from the 7,200 that's in the Gwinnett County Code. We also increased the minimum floor area required for the T&D units. That's in section 212.80.2, Building and Site Design Standards. We adjusted the notice requirements to reduce due process risks, keeping the state minimum requirements, but looked at a lot of additional process that could be taken out to simplify things. That's in section 270-20. We can certainly modify that if you'd like. We increased the distance of the letter distribution for public notice for variances, amendments, and special use permits. Gwinnett County requires anything within 1,000 feet. We've increased that to 2,500 feet. That's also in section 270-20. That is not a requirement of state law. The 1,000 is the minimum. Deleted references to the overlays that are not in the city. Gwinnett County has some overlays that do not apply to Mulberry, so we took those out. We adjusted the planning commission meetings to not require public hearings. Zoning procedures law does require a public hearing, but the way Gwinnett County has it set up, we have multiple public hearings that are required to be advertised. Under the change that was made, it's only required at the city council meeting. Gwinnett County requires a 15-day appeal. We've increased that to 30 days for an appeal, and that is the maximum. It's more conservative in providing adequate opportunity for due process. That's in section 270-80. We changed the conditional uses to limited uses. That's just a language change that is recommended in current zoning law. Let's see, we adjusted the adult entertainment uses. That was working with the attorney that you just heard from. And we corrected various Scribner's errors that we found throughout the document. So that's everything in a summary of what we did with the zoning, the Unified Development Code. We also did a section on a sign ordinance. This is an entirely new ordinance that we provided. We've used it in a number of other cities, most recently in Oakwood, Georgia. There is no content regulation, which is required by law. It defines the types of signs and where and how they can be used and constructed. And it is regulated by district, so it is subject to zoning procedures law when adopting and making changes to those ordinances. That's our presentation. Do you have any questions?
Any questions from the council? Councilman Ingram.
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. A couple questions I have for you. So this was adopted from Peachtree Corners, right? A lot of what we find, was this specifically what you're talking about?
What I was talking about came from Gwinnett County's code.
Got it. With the exceptions of lot size and those things that you
With those
mentioned.
changes, correct.
Got it. And we're having some difficulty hearing from an audio perspective up here, so it reverberates. So if I just may clarify, the substantive changes that you mentioned were the 7,200 square feet to 8,500,
Correct.
right? And then minimum floor area. What, can you restate that? What was the change? Do you capture?
I did not specifically note in my notes here what the additional square footage was, but we did make that adjustment. I can get that for you.
I'm just curious. I mean, it's in the section.
It
so
was
we'll be
made
able to-
slightly bigger, yes.
Got it. But those two, I guess, in addition to this notice for the special notice, right? Those were kind of the major items where we departed from Gwinnett County. Is that
Yep.
accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
I just have one question. These changes that you're recommending amongst all the robust Gwinnett County, that we took this from, where did these recommended changes come from? From you guys?
Yes, it was a collaborative effort of people at our firm working with Mr. Riley's folks and also with the adult entertainment attorney that we spoke with
Okay.
earlier.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question too. You mentioned the notice requirement going from the 1,000-foot requirement to the 2,500-foot requirement. Did I hear those numbers correctly?
Yes.
Can you just explain what that is to the layperson so they know what we're dealing with there?
Yeah, so when the city receives an application for a zoning case or a variance, something that would require public notice, there are signs put up on the property, there's an advertisement that needs to go out, and then there's a requirement for every property owner within a certain distance to be notified of that action or the pending action. And so under Gwinnett's rules, it's anyone within 1,000 feet of that property, the subject property. We're recommending that be made bigger. We made it 2,500 feet.
Any other questions?
I have one more question, or maybe a few more, if I may. Is that okay?
Sure, no problem. Councilman Ingram, go ahead.
Oh, thanks, Mayor.
Yeah, just one more question. On the 2,500 feet, does that stop at the Mulberry city limits, or is that a radius around the property going into Gwinnett? Because we do have people that live on the border, and as I recall from doing zoning in the past, people care, you know, where you live. So would it be Mulberry City only or radial?
No, we would recommend that all properties within that 2,500-foot radius be notified.
Councilman Ingram.
Yeah, I was just going to ask one other quick question. Peachtree Corners, do you know what so I guess this density is five per acre, right? That's where we're at now on the lot size?
Bill might be the better person to answer that. He worked on the Peachtree City, or the Peachtree codes.
I don't know what the lot size on that is. The things that we're taking from Peachtree Corners do not include the lot size pieces.
They don't, okay.
It's just the development code.
Mr. Riley, I don't believe your microphone's on. Maybe you can flick it on. Thank you for those listening at home. Thank you.
I'll just step over here.
There we go. It's on.
Okay. The things that we took from Peachtree Corners do not include the zoning, so that wouldn't be part of the Peachtree Corners zoning. We were just looking at the land development process, and that's what we took, and that's what we're going to mesh with what they've already put together and come up with the best that we can come up to bring to you.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I'm just curious, I guess, Kevin, I know, because you're an expert, you do this in a lot of different places. When you look out in the metro area maybe, or specifically the municipalities you've worked with, and you look at the range that you've seen relative to minimum lot size, was 7,200 Gwinnett County, now we're 8,500 proposed. Where does that fall? Like, what is the range, min, max, that you see in your profession?
So on the small size, we see them as small as 3,500. And then, of course, on the big size, I mean, there are some areas, preservation areas, that require 5 acres. So it's pretty big range, yeah.
In those larger sizes, that larger range size, are those cities similar to us, or are those cities,
No.
they're way out, right?
Yes.
So if you look at a city with similar characteristics to Mulberry, what do you see that upper range limit being that works for the city?
So you've got a lot of different land uses within the city, and so every zoning classification you have has a different minimum requirement. Sure. Your largest lots, off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you exactly what it is, but you've probably got some lots approaching half acre to an acre, something in that neighborhood.
I'm just curious how it helps as we start to discuss with everybody, just to understand that. Thank you.
Which is like a 20,000 square foot lot.
Got it.
Any other questions from the council? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, at this point in time, I believe Mr. McCumber's covered both the signage as well as the zoning, but if you could open up the public hearing, and I believe that anyone wants to speak for the sign ordinance, you have 10 minutes for the sign ordinance, and then anybody who wants to speak against the sign ordinance, 10 minutes for that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Riley. So what Mr. Riley just stated is we now are going to open up the public comment portion. We're going to start with the sign ordinance that Mr. McCumber spoke about. So we basically, how this will work is that we allocate 10 minutes for each side. So in a moment, I'll call up anyone who is for the ordinance. That entire side will be limited to 10 minutes. And so it'll be 10 minutes per side. Then we will call up anyone who'd like to speak in opposition of the signed ordinance, and that will also be limited to 10 minutes. And so at this point, I will go ahead and call for public comment of those in favor of the signed ordinance. And then, Madam Clerk, if you could keep the time, the 10 minutes. So if you're in favor, feel free to come up to the podium and state your name and start your comment. Is there anyone here for public comment in favor? Okay, hearing no one, I will close the public comment for those in favor. Anyone who's opposed to the sign ordinance, I'm going to open up public comment on that. Again, you'll be limited to 10 minutes. Feel free to come forward. Okay, seeing or hearing no one, then I will close public comment on the sign ordinance. Would you like to do the same about the zoning ordinance, Mr. Riley?
Yes, I had and we posted a draft of the sign and the and the zoning ordinances early on, so we've had a draft out, but the final version only got done as we put together all Mr. Berthold's stuff on today. But we will repost with the new one on the webpage. The next thing is the next thing is P, Ordinance 250115. That's the first read of an ordinance creating Chapter 55, Solid Waste, creating a framework for regulation of disposal of solid waste within the city. Q is Ordinance 250116. That's the first read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry, creating Chapter 58, Telecommunications, creating regulations for telecommunications in the city, limitations, plans, permitted uses, administrative approval, stall structures, legal status, and for other purposes. And then R is Ordinance 250117, first read of an ordinance of the City of Mulberry, creating Chapter 62, Utilities, with adoption of Gwinnett County ordinances by reference on water and sewer sanitary regulations, use of public sewers, maintenance of private sewer lines, private wastewater disposal, sewer connections, pretreatment, fats, oils, and grease. The next one is S in the agenda, Ordinance 250118. That's a first read of an ordinance for the City of Mulberry, Georgia, creating zoning resolution or ordinance, creating the zoning for the city, adoption of zoning map, and location of the Gwinnett zoning cases, and adoption of the Gwinnett zoning cases. That is what Mr. McCumber spoke to in his omnibus order, his omnibus zoning ordinance previously, and we need to have a public hearing on that, just the same as we had on the signs, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. So just as we did for the sign ordinances, we will do the same. So those that would like to speak in favor of the proposed ordinances, we will have 10 minutes, and then for those that are opposed, we will reserve 10 minutes for that. So at this time, I will open up public comment for those in favor of the sign ordinance. Please make your way up to the podium if there is any in favor. I'm sorry, thank you, of the zoning ordinance. Thank you, Mr. Riley, I misspoke. So I will open up public comment for those in favor of the zoning ordinance. Is there anyone who'd like to speak in favor? Okay, seeing none, I will close the, okay, I'm sorry. If you could, please come forward. If you could state your name, your address for the record, and then if you know your Mulberry district, if you could state your Mulberry district.
Thank you. My name is Richard Nigro. I live at 3355 Thimbleberry Trail, and I'm in District 5. We just elected gentlemen. I just have a question about Thimbleberry Trail is surrounded by developments that have been just approved or in the process of being built under the terms and conditions of the Zoning Department Planning of Gwinnett County. And I'd just like to know, do we have or will we have any ability to critique what they are in the process of doing after the first of the year, or is that all grandfathered in?
Mr. Riley, do you? Perfect. Yeah, so for the public hearing, we're just hearing comments in favor or against, but we would love to answer your question, just not at this time. So after the meeting, Mr. Riley or myself would be happy to answer that question.
And what you all are reading and referring to, is that available to us citizens of Mulberry?
It is. So
it's
yes, a great question. So it's been posted on the cityofmulberryga.com website. And so, but we will also post this updated version, as Mr. Riley stated.
I saw the agenda item for tonight, but I just couldn't find all of this detail. So it would be difficult for us to come up here and say we're for or against an ordinance that we haven't had a chance to read. So is there the second hearing will already have all the information so we can speak intelligently to whatever ordinances and the conditions? That's all I needed to know.
Absolutely. Thank you. Is there anyone else that'd like to speak in favor of the ordinances? Okay. Seeing none at this time, I will close public comment for those in favor of the zoning ordinances. At this time, I will move on to those who are opposed. Again, we will be limited to 10 minutes for this side. So for those that are opposed, feel free to come up to the podium. And if you could, again, just if you don't mind for the record, Ms. Stevenson, state your name and your address for us. Thank you. And then Madam Clerk, 1 second for me. I'm sorry, Ms. Stevenson. Madam Clerk, if you could keep time for us. Thank you.
Andrea Polk Stevenson, 3240 Mill Grove Terrace, Tequila, Georgia. And I'm in District 3. Hi, Kyle. I just want to say that I did not hear anything about water bodies or streams in the gentleman's description, and I have not, of course, read the zoning ordinance. So I would be against the zoning ordinance if it does not have anything about preserving our lakes and our streams. In addition to that, I think that people who live near streams have the right and should expect to get information about building that will impact the quality of the streams behind or near their homes that might have something to do with flooding or whatever. I myself have had a problem with that, but nobody ever asked me, should they build something up there and let all the water go, all the filthy water go into my clear, beautiful stream that used to go behind my house. So it's things like that that I would like to see in the ordinance, and until I hear something about water bodies, I would be against it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak against or in opposition of the proposed zoning ordinance? Okay, seeing no one, at this time I will close public comment for this first read on the zoning ordinance. I will turn it back over to you, Mr. Riley.
Thank you, Mayor. The last one that I have will be Ordinance 250119, a first read of ordinance of the City of Mulberry, Georgia, creating insurance premium tax, creating a methodology for the currently collected tax to be reallocated to the City of Mulberry instead of Gwinnett County. This is one that we'll need to pass on January 1st, and then the reallocation will take place of the insurance premium tax. It'll go directly to us instead of Gwinnett.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Riley.
And that's all that I have, Mayor. The action items,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Riley. And just to, in conclusion of that first read of the city ordinances, just to reiterate, so we will, I will make sure that the updated ordinances are posted, so you can feel free to go through all of them. And then obviously we will open up public comments again at our second read for you to speak on that, and we'll make that available. But we also have this evening just a few action items that we need to address, some additional items that I'd like to call through. The first item is, if you've been to our other meetings, you are aware that it was an RFP review committee for the banking, which was chaired by Mr. Chuck Warbington, who's the city manager for the city of Lawrenceville. Unfortunately, Mr. Warbington, City Manager Warbington, could not be here this evening. And so I have asked Councilmember Rudnick, who was one of the members of that banking committee, to present on the recommendations of that banking RFP committee. So Councilman Rudnick.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. So yes, I was part of the scoring committee for the banking RFP, which, as we all know, is a very important part of us conducting business. This was to allow us to open up a relationship with a banking institution, open up checking accounts, allow us to pay bills, things of that nature, standard operating banking business. There were 4 members of the scoring committee. no, 5. Chuck Worthington, city manager of Lawrenceville, Jerry Haynes, who was part of the transition committee, Michael Coker, and myself. So I guess that's 4, actually. And there were 5 institutions that put forth proposals. I will say we're in good hands. If we were to go with any of them, they were all great proposals. They were difficult to decipher a lot of differences between, but there was one that stood out more than the other. So the institutions that put forth proposals were First American Bank, Synovus Bank, Touchmark Bank, Home Trust Bank, and Oconee State Bank, and that's in no particular order. And they were scored on the basis of, let me pull up the scoring real quick. A few different categories. So the first category was community contributions and investment in economic development. That was 0 to 10 points. So that was things like how much money do they give back to the community? How are they investing in, I read things such as institutions were investing in down payment assistance for homes. They were investing in local charitable organizations. There was a robust list of things that all these institutions were doing. So all of them had some level of community give back. The second category was proposed solutions and delivery of services. That's basically the nuts and bolts of the banking operation, what they were able to give us in terms of depositing methods, whether we could deposit remotely, reporting back to us, that sort of thing. So there was a set of questions in any RFP that was sent to them, and they answered all of these questions. And that was 0 to 25 points. The third section was qualifications, experience of key personnel. So they were asked to all send resumes of their executive team and people that would be handling our business. And they all did that. I believe one institution did not send the actual resumes, but we were able to get all those. They're all very qualified, number of decades in business. And so, again, we got really good responses. That was 0 to 25. So those were scored without any cost analysis. So the scoring team did not have any cost analysis associated with that. So this is similar to the other RFPs that were graded for the other companies. So we did not want cost to influence our decision. But when we graded those, the company, the institution that was recommended was First American Bank. They are out of Athens. They handle the University of Georgia amongst other municipalities and government institutions. They did provide 3 references of great company or great organizations that they handle. So First American was the recommended company based on those 3 categories. And they were also tied for the lead in recommendation when it came to cost structure as well. So they did take the lead on both of those categories once the cost structure was evaluated. They were extremely generous in cost structure for the city, and I think it will be a long-term relationship with First American for the city. Any questions I can answer?
Any questions from the council for Mayor Pro Tem Rudnick?
I have one, Mayor Pro Tem. So when you met with First American, I know one of the things that we're trying to rationalize right now is the cost structure of the new city and the associated personnel to do key functions. I'm curious, did the topic of lock boxes or come up in terms of mechanism to allow us to more efficiently deposit funds without the use of personnel?
So unlike the other RFPs, there were no actual interviews. This was interview optional, and there was not an interview option taken. So that question did not come up in an interview form.
Gotcha. Okay.
But
Cool.
I will tell you that this particular institution, in their response, was extremely flexible in almost anything that we wanted to do. They give us the most financial flexibility. They give us the most options. They were a member of, I forget the name of the organization, but that oversees banking for municipalities. They have to keep a certain amount of money in the bank to cover our deposits. It was 110% of our deposits. So there was one institution that was not a member of that organization, but this particular one was.
Gotcha. And I have one other question, and this is maybe for Bill or for you, Mayor. With line of credit access, is that something that we're able to do? And sorry for my ignorance on this, I don't know, but is that a service that you
We-
guys,
We do, and
Okay.
this institution does offer a line of credit for the city.
got it? Okay, perfect. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions from the council? I will state too, just to supplement what Mayor Pro Tem Rudnick said, they also have a large branch in downtown Lawrenceville, so we don't have to go all the way to Athens for our local branch as well. Okay, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Rudnick. At this time, I would make a motion for the mayor or interim mayor to authorize the signing and the hiring of First American Bank and Trust on behalf of the city of Mulberry, and further, the mayor and interim mayor be authorized to create the bank accounts as recommended by First American for the city of Mulberry to function starting on January 1. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, we will call a vote. All in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay. It's unanimous that the mayor is hereby authorized to sign the banking agreement with First American Bank and Trust on behalf of the city of Mulberry and to create the bank accounts and become a signer on those accounts. The next action item on the agenda is, obviously you've heard a lot from the consultants. Mr. McCumber was here on behalf of one of them. And obviously we are still in negotiation and we're talking about the cost and the services with these providers. But a lot of them are already doing work for us. And so one of the things that we added to the agenda is to discuss the signing of letters of intent for these particular consultants that have been already doing work basically for the city of Mulberry. These letters of intent basically say that the city of Mulberry intends, for example, the first one on item B, to hire CKH Consulting LLC for finance and administration services starting on January 1st, 2025, as outlined in their response to the Mulberry Governor's Interim Representative's request for proposals. These services are necessary, for example, for financial administration, and a service agreement will be executed upon final approval and completed negotiation. Is there any discussion from the council on, let's start with CKH, who was the recommended finance and administration consultant. Is there any discussion about providing CKH with a letter of intent at this time?
I'll say a couple things about this organization. Reading their qualifications, and I was not part of the scoring team, but reading their qualifications as well as their current customers, previous customers, they have an extremely robust staff of people that are gonna take care of us. They will be able to handle again, finance, purchasing, administration, everything in the office that the city's gonna need. Even speaking to having someone at the front desk to be able to work reception. And I believe they were the company that even saw a couple things in the RFP and our request for proposal that we left out, or that was left out, that they recommended. So I appreciate them being so thorough in their response, and I think we'll be in really good hands with them.
Any other discussion about the letter of intent for CKH Consulting?
I have one, Mr. Mayor. I would just ask that, obviously we're still trying to rationalize the budget. And so I would just say that some language in that letter of intent needs to still allow us to make decisions should they not be able to find certain cost concessions that we require.
Are you proposing an amendment to that letter? How would you phrase that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the macro here, and maybe we can work through this, but the macro is we don't want to, I want to be careful about us indicating we're awarding the business because we're still trying to manage the cost structure. So I think I would probably want to insert some language that indicates that should we not be able to find the right cost structure for the existing proposal, given some recent budgetary changes we're aware of, that we would be forced to look at other options. Not that we would want to. I certainly think all of these guys have put a lot of time and effort, guys and girls, I should say, have put a lot of time and effort into the proposals. But we just want to make sure that we're very clear in our language that we are going through some cost rationalization on the budget that's going to require some teamwork together. Yeah.
I guess my question would be, my discussion on that would be, obviously that last sentence says a service agreement will be executed upon final approval and completed negotiation. Do you feel comfortable with the completed negotiation language, or do you feel like there needs to be an additional sentence added to that?
I mean, I guess it's a question for the rest of the council. As long as, I guess if Bill feels that that language protects us, letter intent is very specific, right? So I just want to make sure we're,
Or perhaps instead of, we should say successful negotiation in lieu of the completed negotiation.
there you go. Yeah, successful negotiation, yeah. We just have some, we're at the, I mean, for the council, I think we're at the, we're at the 5-yard line. We just want to make sure that it's clear that we still have a little work to do.
Okay, so are you going to, just want to be clear, so on the letter of intent for CKH Consulting LLC, if I understand you correctly, you're making a motion to amend that letter, the last sentence of that letter, to say a service agreement will be executed upon final approval of a successful negotiation? Or final approval upon final approval and successful negotiation?
Probably after successful negotiation. Successful negotiation, then final approval by
Correct.
the council.
Yeah, I would change the sequence around. So I would say a service agreement will be executed upon, or maybe will be executed pursuant to a successful negotiation.
How about,
And final approval by the mayor and council.
Correct, yeah.
okay, what about this language? So last sentence says a service agreement will be executed following a successful negotiation and final approval by the council. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, following or pursuing. I don't know if Bill cares about that. You don't care, okay. I'm not a lawyer, so.
Well, it'd just be a judge listening to it, and it all says the same thing.
Understood, yeah. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I think that sounds great.
Okay, so we have a motion from, if I understand correctly, from Councilman Ingram that says a service agreement, well, to amend the letter of intent to CKH Consulting LLC, the last sentence to read, a service agreement will be executed following a successful negotiation and final approval by the council. Do I have a second to that amendment to this letter?
I second that. I second that motion.
You
Oh,
made
I'm
the
sorry.
motion, so you can't second.
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Shields. Is there any discussion about that amendment to this letter? Okay, at this time.
Just a quick question. I think, Doug, what you're trying to get at
Hold
is
your
if,
microphone up.
if we can't get close enough and negotiate, then I'm sorry, you go away, we don't pay you anything. Was that kind of the intent you were getting at? That we
Yeah,
have
I
no
think-
liability?
Correct, that's right. So I guess I just want to, certainly everyone, there's a lot of folks in here that have worked on these RFPs, and I know they've put a lot of hard work into it, and they've already done a great job of trying to support us as a new city. However, that being said, we also know that we have some budgetary challenges, right, going into this first year.
Yep.
So I just want to make it clear that, because some of these discussions have not all been had yet with the vendors, that we need to work hard to get this over the finish line. I suspect we will be successful in that, but should we not be, we may need to pursue other remedies or other options, I guess. Yeah.
Something makes it null and void.
Right.
Any other discussion on the amendment to this letter? Okay, at this time I will call a vote on the motion to amend the letter as stated. All in favor, say, raise your right hand. All opposed? Okay, the letter stands amended. That last sentence will now read, a service agreement will be executed following a successful negotiation and final approval by the council. At this time, is there any other discussion or amendments proposed to this letter? Hearing none, Then at this time, I will go ahead and I will take a motion to approve this letter of intent for CKH Consulting LLC as amended. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt this letter of intent for CKH as amended.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Thank you, Councilman Shields. Any discussion about this letter as amended? Okay, at this time I'll call a vote. All in favor of adopting this letter as amended? All opposed? Okay. This letter of intent is adopted as amended to CKH Consulting and will be signed by the mayor. The next letter of intent is the letter of intent for CPL Architectural Engineering Planning for both planning and development and inspection services and permitting and inspection services. So this is, you heard from Mr. McCumber, but his company is going to be providing two separate services to the city. Do I have any motion to amend this letter?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the letter of intent for CPL Architecture, Engineering, Planning, the last sentence to read, or to be amended following a successful negotiation and final approval. So the last sentence would read, a service agreement will be executed following a successful negotiation and a final approval.
Okay, we have a motion to amend the last sentence of that letter to match the letter that was approved in CKH Consulting. Do I have a second to amend that letter?
You have a second.
Okay, any discussion on that amendment? Okay, at this time I'll call a vote as to the amendment. All in favor? All opposed? It's unanimous. The amendment, the letter stands amended. At this time, is there any other amendments to the letter to CPL Architectural Engineering and Planning? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the letter of intent as amended to CPL.
I'll make a motion to adopt the letter of intent for CPL as amended.
Okay, I will second that motion. Is there any discussion? No discussion. At this time, I'll call a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The letter of intent as amended to CPL is adopted and will be signed by the mayor. The next item is the item D under action items, which is the letter of intent for Interdev, which is the IT coordinator. Councilman Ingram, do you have a motion to amend this one as well?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the letter of intent for Interdev, the last sentence of the letter to read, a service agreement will be executed following a successful negotiation and a final approval.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
You have a second.
Okay, any discussion on that amendment?
Yeah, I got a question. In the first paragraph, it says Interdev is going to do planning and development. We might want to strike that.
Thank you, Councilman Sullivan. Yes, that should read just information technology. So I will make amendment to I will make a motion to amend to remove planning and development from the first sentence of that letter as a Scrivener's error. Do I have a second on that amendment?
You have a second.
Any discussion? Okay, at this time, I'll call a vote. All in favor of removing planning and development? All opposed? Okay. The letter of intent to Interdev, we will remove from line 1 the planning and development. And then I will let you go ahead and remake your motion, Councilman Ingram. Sorry about that.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the Interdev letter of intent, last sentence to read, a service agreement will be executed following a successful negotiation and final approval.
Final approval by the council?
Final approval by the council. Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion to amend that last sentence to match the same that was in the CKH as well as the CPL letter. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, is there any discussion on that amendment? Okay, we'll take a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, so the letter of intent to interdev will stand amended both as to the first sentence, striking planning and development, and as to the last sentence, adding be following a successful mediation and final approval by the council. Is there any other amendments to the letter of intent to interdev? Okay, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adopt the letter of intent to interdev as amended.
I'll make a motion to adopt the letter of intent to interdev as amended.
I will second that. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. At this time, the vote is unanimous that the letter of intent to interdev is approved as amended and will be signed and sent by the mayor. The next item, item E on the action items, is one of the things that we have wanted to do, obviously that was a goal of mine, was to continue to offer communication to the public. And in order to do that, I think one of the best ways to do that would be through the creation of a official City of Mulberry Facebook page, an official YouTube channel where we could potentially post these recordings of the meetings, as well as an official email list. So for those that would like to receive updates, you can sign and receive updates directly from the city. My comment on that is I feel like that is a need that we need in order to keep our citizens informed of what's going on. I will also comment that it is my understanding that an official website for the city is in development and is being put together. And so that will also be there. So you will have access. The hope is that in my recommendation, if we do have a Facebook page, an email list, and a YouTube channel, this will be in addition to any future website as well. Any discussion on authorizing the mayor's creation of a City of Mulberry official Facebook page, email list, and YouTube channel?
I have just a little bit of discussion, Mr. Mayor. Maybe just since we're going to try to talk about this now, maybe we should add to the list, right? We have Facebook, maybe, I don't know, Instagram?
You're cooler than me, I guess. Okay, Instagram.
Maybe Twitter, too, if we're going to do it all at one time.
Okay, so Mr. Riley, help me from a legal standpoint. Is that an amendment that he's making, or is that just we would make a motion authorizing the mayor to do all those items?
Council member could make a motion to adopt the action item with the addition of those additional things, and then you would only have to vote once.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to authorizing the mayor's creation of the City of Mulberry official Facebook page, email list, YouTube channel, in addition to Instagram and Twitter.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
Second the motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Ingram. Any discussion?
Just one point of technicality. It's not called Twitter anymore. It's called X. We might want to put that down right.
Okay. So are you amending the motion?
Yes.
Okay.
I am anal that way.
Okay. So let's do this. I will make a motion authorizing the mayor's creation of the city's official Facebook page, email list, YouTube channel, Instagram, Twitter /X. Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion? Okay. At this time, we'll call a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. It is approved. The mayor is authorized to create the City of Mulberry's official Facebook page, email list, YouTube channel, Instagram, and Twitter /X account. The last item up on the agenda is the appointment of a Public Communications Committee. Obviously, like I said, what's really important to me is that the public stay informed. I had proposed a few individuals that I felt like should comprise the start of that committee. Not to say that we couldn't amend it and add people later, but just kind of while we're in this interim period. I proposed a committee chairman of Councilman Doug Ingram from District 5. Committee members to be myself, just as mayor, Christian Millets, who is here with Hamilton Mill United Methodist Church as the Director of Technology, who's great and does all our live streams, as well as Acting Clerk Chandler Faith Pitts, so that she would have access to those communications as well. Is there any discussion about this proposed communications committee?
No, I just say thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think it's important, as we've heard from some citizens tonight. I think trying to get the information out to the city of Mulberry is going to be really important, particularly in these first critical months. So I think it's a great initiative.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, at this time I will entertain a motion to appoint these 4 individuals the first Public Communications Committee for the city of Mulberry.
I'll second.
Okay, I'll make the motion. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Rudnick has second. Any discussion? Okay, at this time I'll call a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous that the Public Communications Committee will be comprised of Councilman Doug Ingram, Mayor Michael Coker, Christian Millets of Hamilton Mill United Methodist Church, and then Acting Clerk Chandler Faith Pitts. The final agenda item is the one we added, obviously, when we added the agenda, which you heard tonight specifically from Mr. Riley. He talked about that one of the primary things we need to do is adopt the ordinances pertaining to business licenses so that we can get our business license bills sent out to the local businesses. And so we need to get that done so we can obviously get those invoices out as soon as possible. And so I am recommending or proposing that we have a special called meeting on that's Monday, December 23rd. That's the day before Christmas Eve at 9 a.m. So it would be a special called meeting for the purposes of adopting that or that set of codes pertaining to the occupational licenses and taxes. Is there any discussion on that item?
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'd like to add one item to that, and that is to set our regular scheduled meetings for the year 2025 as we need to do in December, and this will be our last meeting in December.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on either calling that December 23rd at 9 a.m. special called meeting regarding the occupational licenses, as well as setting the regular schedule for the 2025 regular meetings? None? Okay, at this time I'd make a motion to call a special called meeting on December the 23rd, 2025 at 9 a.m. for the purposes of adopting the ordinances pertaining to business licenses, business taxes, and to set our regular scheduled meetings for the year 2025. Do I have a second?
You have a second.
Thank you, Councilman Sullivan. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will call a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, it passes unanimously. So we will have a special called meeting on December 23rd at 9 a.m. of this year for 2 purposes. The first will be to adopt those ordinances pertaining to business licenses and occupational taxes, and also to set our regular meeting schedule. We also left another opportunity for public comments here. Now that we figure you've heard kind of the action items, you've heard a little bit about the ordinances. So again, I'm going to open up the floor one last time. If anyone is interested in making a public comment, we will limit the public comments to 2 minutes. Again, we will not be able to, the council will not be able to respond at this time, but if there is anyone, we will open that up. Is there anyone who'd like to make a public comment? All right, Ms. Stevenson, again, if you could state your name and your address for the record. Thank you.
Andrea Polk, Stevenson, 3240. Excuse me. Millgrove Terrace, Tequila, 30019. I'm in District 3. I did forget when I was talking about the zoning to mention trees. We in Gwinnett County are so fortunate to have had such beautiful trees, and they've been ripping them down right and left, right and left. And I know originally when this city was first thought of, that we were thinking that we really wanted to try to keep trees. So I'm going to ask you to perhaps, to talk about it and think about what you think. But perhaps when builders get rid of trees, they're obligated to put more trees in, or to keep some of the trees where the house isn't, or something along those lines, so that we too can participate in trying to keep our world healthy and clean. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevenson. Is there anyone else who'd like to make a public comment? Mr. Stevenson, if you could say your name and your address for the record.
Sure, thank you. I'm James Stevenson, 3243 Mill Grove Terrace, Tequila, Georgia, 30019. Very interesting meeting. I appreciate everything y'all are doing. I may not always agree with you, but I appreciate what you're doing and the effort that it's going to take. My question is, I've got all these all these letters of intent and all these authorizations and all these expenses. I also know that you're negotiating with the county for those things that are not, those services not met here, fire, law enforcement, public safety. When are we as citizens going to get the results of these negotiations and the county negotiations so that we know exactly where the city stands financially?
Mr. Rowley, can I just give a brief answer to that question? There's a, Mr. Stevenson, thank you for that question. So there's a 2-year transition period with the county where they're obligated to continue to provide services with us. So it's going to be a long negotiation, it's going to be a long process, but it's going to be over the next 2-year period.
Okay, and then what about these letters of intent that you've got here for those services that we will have on ourselves?
Specifically, what's the question? I'm sorry.
The letters of intent that we've adopted here, that y'all have adopted here, when will we get the total of the cost for these?
And just my quick response to that would be obviously per Mr. Ingram, Councilman Ingram, I mean, obviously the negotiation is still ongoing, but I'm sure that once we are able to reach an agreement with these providers, we'll be more than happy to provide a copy to the public.
Thank you. And my last comment, when we get the web page up, can it look like a professional web page and not a rah-rah cheer for the city of Mulberry? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. Any other public comments? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and close public comment for the evening. I would like to make a motion to remove or table the executive session as not necessary for tonight. Does anyone like to make a motion to have an executive session or feel like it's necessary? No? Okay, at this time, I would make a motion to remove the executive session from the agenda from this evening. I will take a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, at this time, we'll call a vote. All in favor of removing executive session for the evening? All opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. We will not have an executive session this evening. That is everything that we have for tonight. So thank you very much for coming and being here this evening. We love to see so many people come out to the city councils and participate. So at this time, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second the motion.
Okay. We have having a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call a vote. All in favor? All opposed? Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you so much for coming this evening.